Very excited about today's video because I get to talk about one of my favorite Pokemon, Slowbro, which I don't get to talk about a lot in the TCG. Fortunately, the Vending series was chock full of very interesting Psychic type Pokemon, and Slowbro was a part of that. For 1 Psychic Energy, you and your opponent's active go to sleep, and for 2 Psychic Energy, you deal 30 damage, but only if you're asleep. So a little bit of a haymaker card going here. Turn 2, 30 damage, and all you have to do is make sure that your active is asleep, which in a base Vending deck is pretty easy to do. You don't even have to rely on Big Yawn. This is a very simple, very fun deck. I've had a blast playtesting this thing, and I'm slow glad that it actually turned out to be kind of a good deck too. And let me just say up front, this is a bit of a rogue deck, more for funsies. There's always people down in the comments going, well, this isn't the best deck ever made. Why would you even post a deck list and expect me to blah, 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 blah. It's hard to believe, but sometimes people play this game of cardboard slabs with pictures of cartoon monsters drawn on them just for fun. It doesn't have to be hyper competitive all the time. Anyway, it's Slowbro time. Let's look at this deck list. We're going to be starting off with that Fossil Slowpoke, which I see a lot of discussion about all the time for its Scavenge attack, which lets you discard a Psychic Energy off of Slowpoke in order to get a trainer card back out of your discard and into your hand. That's pretty good. I mean, you get a free item finder out of it, but I don't think it's ever been that good of a card just for that attack. You are having to attach 2 Psychic Energy onto a basic Pokemon that can't deal damage. Especially in this build where you absolutely do not want a Slowpoke on turn 2, and so by the time the second Psychic Energy is down, it should already be evolved into Slowbro, put to sleep, and dealing out those chunks of 30 damage with Big Snore, getting the game rolling very quickly. And the way that you're going to ensure that Slowbro is always asleep is to have multiple Drowsy on your bench. With multiple Drowsy, you're going to be able to ensure that your active Pokemon is put to sleep off of the tails. And, you know, in the process, your opponent's probably going to get put to sleep too. Just the odds of coin flips there, and can cause a pretty disruptive game state because you're trying to keep a special condition on your active, and at the same time a byproduct is just your opponent's active can also get put to sleep, have to flip a coin between turns to wake up. As support, we got a promo Mewtwo for late game, so you can use energy absorption, get those Psychic Energy back out of your discard, attached to Mewtwo. Again, it's another haymaker attack similar to Slowbro, just not as disruptive. Vending Mr. Mime for if you are up against those big normal types that resist psychic damage. It's going to nullify that, let you go ahead and get those 30 damage chunks in. For the draw power in this deck, I'm going 3 Erica, 2 Oak. That's plenty for this deck. You know, like I've said in other videos, the more I play around with Erica, the more I prefer it over Oak. And then just for your general search, you're going to have a couple copies of Computer Search. That way you can actually get out those Drowsies very early on. If you're having trouble drawing them, you can get the Slowbro on turn 2 when you need it, when you want to evolve up. Full playset of plus power, because this is a haymaker deck. You are dealing chunks of 30 damage. You want to add on to those as much as possible. Get those key KOs when you need them. That's what the deck is all about. And you do have a little bit more time with that because odds are your opponent's going to have to take a couple turns here or there being put to sleep and not being able to hit those coin flips or to get a switch or a warp point or something. As for the rest of the trainer base, you've probably already noticed, we're going full disruption with this deck. We are doing Trapper Slowbro. So, full playset of Rocket Sneak Attack, full playset of Rocket's Trap, and a full playset of Lass. And these cards all complement Erica pretty well in that it doesn't matter if your opponent is able to draw cards too because you're just going to decimate their hand. No Imposter Oak, but the deck doesn't really need it. Also got Warp Point in here just so you can move around some of these Pokemon. It should be pretty simple to keep the energy actually on Slowbro since you're going to be hitting your opponent with a lot of Blast. So you should have multiple powered up Slowbros. That way you can just Warp Point one into another, force your opponent to bring out a new target for you to attack. Early game for this deck goes very quickly because you are using up all of your draw power, laying down all of your plus powers, hitting your opponent with as many energy removals as you can draw. Just in the first 2 or 3 turns, because once that's over, once this very basic setup is down, you're going to hit your opponent with Trapper. They're going to constantly be having to reshuffle all the trainers in their hand, and then whatever's left in their hand is also going to get reshuffled thanks to Rocket Trap. And then we've also got Nightly Garbage Run, just to recycle some of these useful cards. You guys are familiar with what Garbage Run does. A couple copies of Gust just to get those new targets out that, you know, maybe are close to a knockout or at least are less threatening than whatever your opponent has in their active position currently. And then the rest of the deck's going to be filled out with that purpley Psychic Energy. So overall, turn 1, Slowpoke hopefully. Turn 2, evolve into Slowbro, get your second Psychic Energy down. Also get a couple of Drowsy minimum out of your deck. Get those onto the bench. Start using Long Distance Hypnosis. Start attacking with Big Snore while using your trainer base to disrupt the game state. So a lot of the power in this deck does rely on that sleep mechanic, where your opponent cannot hit their coin flip, their active stays asleep, they don't have a way to swap out or do anything about it, and you basically get a free turn for extra setup or for getting more trainers out of your deck. But you really can't rely on that mechanic and just hope that your opponents are always flipping tails. For your own active Slowbro, you want to hit tails, you want to stay asleep, because that's the only way that you can attack. And that plays into what I really like about this deck, is it plays differently than any other Haymaker, and that goes for you and your opponent, where they don't really know how to deal with a fast-acting Slowbro. I mean, it's a 90 HP Pokemon as well, and, you know, it's not overly powerful. Big Snore is not a giant attack. You know, this is going to be a 2-hit KO minimum on whatever your opponent has. Definitely a 3-hit on your bigger stuff like Kangaskhan or Lickitung. But again, the sleep on your opponent's side of the field is going to buy you some extra turns here and there to actually make that 30 damage seem way more than it actually is. And usually before your opponent even has the opportunity to make that between turns coin flip to see if they wake up, you can hit them with a sneak attack, just in case they have a warp point, a switch, anything else in their hand that could wake up their active. If they don't hit that coin flip, you can just go ahead and put it right back in their deck. Or if not, it's also just a great way to get rid of an opponent's lass or an energy removal they may have. Being up against trainer disruption and an ongoing special condition can be very overwhelming and frustrating. And because of that kind of 2-hit combo you have going on there, it actually stacks up pretty well against other base Rocket and base Gem decks. Unfortunately, outside of just lucky coin flips, this deck doesn't really have an answer to things like Rain Dance or anything that has Chansey in it. For those matchups, you could put in 1 or 2 copies of Jungle Mr. Mime, since this card is built to deal with those high-scale threats. But then, of course, you can't use Invisible Wall if Mr. Mime is asleep, so that kind of makes the Drowsies on your bench a little less helpful. And overall, this deck just really does not have a good answer for Muck, other than just knocking out the Grimers before they can evolve. Which is very possible as long as you don't have the Vending Mime on your bench. A Big Snore is going to knock out a Grimer. But one of the decks that I play tested this Slowbro against was an Arcanine Muck build that's also pretty fun to play, even though Muck is very much a no fun allowed card. So I may end up doing another video on Muck Arcanine at some point. Just let me know down in the comments if that's something you guys would be interested in seeing. Also, let me know any other request decks you may have across any formats, as I'm always playtesting in multiple. Let me know your thoughts on this deck. Is there another way that you would run Vending Slowbro? Thanks for watching, and I will see you next video. Bye.